but also to monitor its own performance. That's why we went to the gender audit. We made a contract with an expert from Palestine, which had accreditation from the International Labor Organization, and used the methodology of this organization and implemented it in our ICHR. She found out that there is a gap between the goodwilling and the intentions of the workers, the staffers of ICHR, and their performance. They do not differentiate between human rights standards and conventions which focuses on human rights, and the unique role of CEDAW, which is not considered a Women Human Rights Convention. No, it's a binding obligations written in a strong documentation with obligations which emphasize duty bearers to exclude, to eliminate all kinds of discrimination against women. So when we are teaching CEDAW, we are not teaching the rights of women, but we are proceeding how we can eliminate any discrimination against women. So you cannot teach duty bearers how to eliminate discrimination against women unless you match between your internal role and your external role. And she found some rejection from some employees. How shall I be trained on something I am training duty bearers on? No, there is a gap in the expertise and the knowledge of the human rights defenders in this domain. So it is very important to fill this gap. And it is not a shame even to nominate some human rights female defenders from civil society to teach us. Okay? So we have to cooperate with us. She found out that, for example, in our reports, we made many reports to what extent the Palestinian Ministry of Education includes human rights in its curriculum. Okay, great. But we had never made a report on gender mainstreaming in our curriculum. So this gap should be filled. You are a human rights defender, but you have to take care of another important issue, how to implement this belief in your reports, in your image, in your practices, in your tools, methodology, and the practices. Very important, the issue of empowerment. We as human rights defenders, staffers of commissions, we need empowerment, more training. I think 20% of the training or the training strategies and the plans of staffers and commissioners, 20% of their time and methodology should focus on this issue simply because we want to fill the gap. It is very important to use participation in this gender auditing, and we shall call it participatory gender audit. It means we have to communicate with the duty bearers, with the stakeholders, with NGOs, with female NGOs, with the staffers themselves. For sometimes, and you mentioned, my lady, that recruitment. There are problems in the recruitment, some discrimination and bias. Why shall not we discuss with the staffers, what do you think about the best practices in nominating, promotion, and the selection of the staffers for this position? Let us listen to them. We are defending participation as a great value of human rights. So let us be practiced inside the institution itself. And for example, we have revised the maternity leave. We have to, and we reached the conclusion that we have to extend the paternity leave from 3 days to 5 days, and we expecting to increase it to 7 days because the normal days of holidays, the 2 days weekly, are conducted of this, donation. So it's unfair. So we have to make it bigger and longer. I think it is an obligation to move from theory to practice, to fill the gap, to increase the expertise of the human rights defenders within the Commission. And it is very important to create accountability measures. Accountability measures does not mean punishment, sanctions, and penalties. But we have to focus on the role of the commissioners. Commissioners are playing a very and vital important, they are charismatic body which will enhance the readiness of staffers to accept the idea. Commissioners playing the role sometimes of the cassation court, sometimes the ICG, and sometimes the ICC. Sometimes the cassation court, we resort to them when we exhaust justice remedies inside the institution and we get no justice, we go to the commissioners and they will bring justice to us. And so this is a mechanism of accountability. Or they play the role of the ICJ. They give advisory opinion on the thorny tasks inside in the institution. And sometimes sometimes we need them to play the role of the ICC and issue some, penalties and punishments, but in a framework of disciplinary, measures when there is, gender mainstreaming abuses inside the institution. Thank you very much. I think ready for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bahajat. And it's very nice to know that your name. I find very difficult to pronounce, but it's pleasure sweet. It's a very, very nice translation. And we fully agree with you that the preconditions for working for the human rights and the gender equality, as you mentioned, the self-determination, freedom, dignity, this is the prerequisite to work fully. But even despite having this very difficult and the challenging situation, the work you are doing at the Palestine, it's commendable, and we really appreciate the work you are doing. It's very nice, and the accountability mechanism you mentioned is that's the way we really need to work towards. So thank you very much sharing your experience. Now we have the UN Women Nepal country representative Patricia, and among the UN system and UN agency, the UN Women is a mandated institution to work on gender equality and the JC. So UN Women Nepal is also very much engaging with the NHRC regarding the development of this JC audit and the implement of the JC audit. So in this context, the UN, as you are very much involved integrating the gender and the JC mainstreaming in NHRC, I would like to ask the question to share your experience and the approaches. What are the approaches and the tools recommended by UN Women to, that is very useful to integrate the JC in NHRIs, and particularly because you are in Nepal, and particularly you are also engaged and collaborating with the Nepal National Human Rights Commission. So what is the usefulness of using this gender audit tool to accelerate the JC in NHRIs? So over to you, Patricia.
Thank you, Savinji, and good afternoon. Thank you for bearing with us after a long day of discussions, and I hope I can say something new after so many that has been mentioned. But dear chair of the panel, dear panelists, chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission, and the convener commissioner of this event, allow me to start by saying that as I was coming to this event, I was so excited to participate in this space, because it came to my mind a phrase that I think for many of the women's organizations here present, it becomes a mantra, that is that women's rights are human rights. No? It is perhaps obvious, but it's a little bit over 30 years that it was officially recognized by the UN that indeed we're not talking about a parallel track of rights. This is really at the central of the human rights agenda. So I'm so excited to be here, and that the focus of this conference is precisely on gender. I would perhaps like to share a little bit of the challenges that we see in our role as UN Women in JC mainstreaming, not only in national human rights institutions, but across the board, when we work with line ministries, where we work with private sector, and even when we work inside the UN, we also have challenges when it comes to gender mainstreaming, and this is also why institutions like UN Women was created, because we felt like gender mainstreaming was not enough. So let me offer a few perspectives on what we think has worked and what is still a challenge, and then I'll say a few words also about the GESI audit conducted here in Nepal that we're very proud of having supported also together with the Embassy of Finland. If I had to summarize on GESI mainstreaming, I would say to me it's at 3+1 elements. On the one hand, the policy frameworks, the paper, the JURE, we have talked a lot about how it is important to have there the formality of the policy frameworks, but two very important elements are needed for that. One is that those policies are informed by evidence, and by evidence is quantitative and qualitative evidence. I think we had a great example by the Asia Pacific Forum with the presentation of some of the quantitative data that shows numbers, and also I see that within the UN, it's only when we see the actual disaggregation of numbers and disaggregation with as multiple variables as possible, because we know this is not like a binary analysis, it has to look at all this intersectionality, that we can better inform the policies. But also the quantitative and the perceptions are extremely important, because we're talking about gender stereotypes, and it's about these entrenched social norms that are so much there that very often times, unless we unpack them, unless we discuss them, and unless we build from the perceptions of the staff, we're not able to be effective. One example of that perhaps would be paternity leave, where even where we have seen efforts in private sector in many countries, establishing paternity leaves, if the perception and the peer support is not there, and the perception of the employees is that this is not going to be welcomed, they will never actually benefit from that measure. So that for the evidence. And of course, the second element, and it has been mentioned numerous times on policies, is that we have budgets, resources that are supporting the implementation. The best legislation in the world is nothing without a proper budget to support it. And there, what I see very often times is that when we talk about gender-responsive budgeting, that has been a tool that has been used for many, many years now, we